So about 2 months ago, I made a video that was this one, and it was called The Car Brands That Will Be Dead Within the Next 12 Months. It was about legacy car manufacturers. Okay, dramatic license on the title, I grant you, but you know what? You have to do that with content. That's the only way to get people to click through and see what you're talking about. But I did get criticized in comments on, not just on YouTube, but on some other platforms for, rumor mongering, sounding the doom and gloom, downplaying the contribution of the car industry, and, just bad mouthing it. And the reality is it's not true. I'm a fan of the car industry. I've been following it for 35 years. I love cars. I love the car industry. But my job is also to observe. To look at what's happening, to look at trends, to look at the car industry, and to project forward and see what could happen, what might happen, and talk about it. That's part of what I do. I analyze industry trends, I look at news, I look at what's happening, and then I try to bring that to you in an encapsulated, comprehensive form so that you too can be well informed and maybe make future purchasing decisions based on that, or maybe just keep on top of things out of a keen interest. Now, I think I feel a little bit vindicated, not that anybody or any other car manufacturers has actually died yet, I hasten to add, but things are changing, and they're changing really rapidly, and it's not looking great for legacy car companies, and that is just a sad reality, I'm afraid. There's an article from yesterday in the Financial Times, and the title of that one is Chinese automakers are overtaking European rivals, says car shipping chief. Now you're saying, oh, you're just relying on this story based on shipping thing, but that shipping is a big part of what happens. Don't forget, a few years ago, actually I think about a year ago, and I did do a video on this as well, there was a story where Chinese car companies themselves were actually buying more ships because they had that much stock. They had saturated their market. There's a massive price war happening in China. So in China, they've saturated the market, but they've got these massive manufacturing plants that they've already made and the capacity of churning out huge numbers of cars. So they have to ship them abroad. So they were buying more ships. So this is a very relevant piece of news. Plus, two other things I've seen just today which actually corroborates this story. And let's get into all of that right after this.
A brown car guy. Brown car guy.
Right, so this story, world's biggest operator, which is, I can't even pronounce it, Wallenius Wilhelmsen. I think it's from Norway. There's a shipping company, right? And they're basically trying to boost their revenue by helping newer brands from China expand overseas. I mean, this is what they're trying to do, but they don't need to worry about the Chinese. The Chinese are already doing it themselves. The story then goes on to talk about European car makers are rapidly losing market share globally as Chinese rivals enter a new phase of expansion and innovation. Now, just today, like I said, I think I saw something from Jayco. Have you heard of Jayco? Most people have probably never heard of Jayco before, and maybe now they do. Jayco is owned by Chery, which is a Chinese company. It's not even one of the big ones, but Jayco, I believe they're now outselling one of the top selling SUVs, compact SUVs in the UK, which is Nissan Qashqai. Jayco is now outselling it. And to be honest, I don't think this is just, smoke and mirrors and press releases and numbers and stats that lie. No, I mean, I am seeing them everywhere. Honestly, this is I first came across this brand, I think it was 2 years ago at the SMMT test day, and I reviewed two of their cars. I don't know if it was Jayco or the sister brand, Omoda, but both of these brands now, Jayco and Omoda, I mean, honestly, like you go down the local high street here in northwest London and you'll always see at least a couple of them, and they're just everywhere now. You're getting to see so many of them, and you start to think, well, what kind of a deal are they doing that people are buying them? They're doing a pretty good deal, but also the cars are quite nice. They look like mini Range Rovers. To be honest, if you squint and just at a glance, you might think, oh, it's a Range Rover. It's not, but they have that kind of look about them. So They are dominating. I just saw, I think it was a press release from MG saying they've just had the best year ever of selling EVs. BYD, of course, is on the march. XPeng and loads of other new Chinese brands are entering the market massively. So, you know, when I talked about the fact that, you know, the car industry is in massive flux and transition, and partly it's because of the huge amount of cars that are now coming for this country that is essentially, in the broader scheme of things, if you look in the dateline of the car industry, is a new upstart. You know, it's relatively new. It's just been a few years, but they are gradually like taking over. I can tell you, Chinese exports, this is according to the same report, Chinese exports have jumped by 23% to 6.4 million passenger vehicles last year, 50% higher than the second place country, which was Japan. This is according to Alex Partners. The consultancy expects Chinese manufacturers to capture 30% of the global automotive market, 30%, nearly a third of the global automotive market by 2030 in, well, let's call it 4 years' time. That would be up from 21% last year. So 21% last year in 2024, and by 2030, 5 years, 6 years, whatever you want to call it, that'll gone to 30%. I reckon actually that 30% is conservative. I reckon it could actually be more than that. Chinese brands including BYD, Chery, MG and SAIC, SAIC, have expanded rapidly in Western Europe and accounted for 5.7% of new car sales in the first 9 months of this year, 2025, up from 3.2% for the same period last year. So what is that? That's about 2.5% increase year on year. That's why I think that 30% is a little bit conservative, because if you look at the proportional increase that's happening here, that bar is still going rapidly up, not sort of sloping down, it's just going up. And also don't forget the fact that even when it's not Chinese cars, a lot of EVs that even other manufacturers are making have Chinese batteries in them, because all the EV batteries pretty much are being processed and produced and packaged and sent out from China itself. And one of the reasons that this is happening is because China, although it's a relatively new entrant to the car industry and a relative upstart, as I've said, but whereas just a few years ago we used to mock them for just being copycats, and the fact that Jaycos or Armadas or whatever they are look a bit like Range Rovers proves that they're still kind of doing that a little bit. But where they're really winning is that they're no longer copycats. They've now moved from being copycats to being innovators, being massive innovators. The rate at which they've done this jump that they've done, is probably, I would say, this is just anecdotal on my own experience, 2 or maybe even 3 times quicker than Korea did. And of course, Korea was quicker than Japan's automotive industry revolution. I remember being at a Dubai Motor Show maybe about 10 years ago or something like that. And I think it was the first time that several, I think 2 or 3 Chinese companies had come over and displayed at the Dubai Motor Show. And one of them had brought like a limousine, which a limousine was basically like a regular cheap old little saloon that they chopped and stretched. And you open the door and it was a manual gearbox and cheap plastic dashboard, and it's just like, what is this? Have you even understood what the concept of a limousine is? And I remember the first time we got one in for review, it was I think a year before that. So I think it was, it would have been 2010, maybe something like that. So a couple of years before then, I was still at Car magazine, so the Middle East edition of Car, and we got one in, the depot had got one in, and I thought, well, I better go down and give it a go, just to have it. I wasn't going to write the review, but I thought, let me just, for academic reasons, go and try it out. And I remember going down to the car park and unlocking the door and opening the door and taking one look inside and thinking, nah, I'm not driving this. That is, it's just horrendous. I'm not even getting into it. It's all cheap plastic, shiny. Bits felt like they would fall off. It is just like, door was tinny. It was like, nah, I'm not driving this. We've gone from that to the Chinese cars today, which I would recommend to people. I'd say go and get that car. It's really good. That's how quickly this has happened. So this has happened in the space of less than 15 years that this has happened. So this is quite extraordinary. And why has this happened? Well, because I remember sitting in a BYD conference, maybe it was earlier this year or late last year, I can't remember. And they were just doing a recap of the industry, of their company, and in the context of the industry. And one figure had stood out to me and has stood out to me since then, and it's actually grown now. I'll just tell you in a minute. They revealed that they had 100,000 people working, not in their factories, not in their company, no. 100,000 people working in research and development alone. So this is where all the technology happens. This is where all the innovation happens. This is where all the engineering happens. 100,000 Chinese graduates, engineers, scientists, thinkers, just doing that. Not building the cars, not putting them together, no, just sitting around, on computers doing that, researching new ideas, new concepts, new ways to do things. That's staggering. So to put that into context, one of the world's biggest car companies obviously is Volkswagen Group. The Volkswagen Group has just over 58,000 R&D people. So that's quite a lot too, 58,000. But that's, of course, don't forget, Volkswagen includes Audi, Porsche, SEAT, what's the other one? Skoda. There's quite a Bentley. So there's Bugatti. There's quite a few companies within the Volkswagen Group. And they have under 60,000 people. I just checked BYD's number now, just 110,000. So they've added more people, 110,000 people just thinking up how to create the next generation of cars. Again, by comparison, one of the other biggest manufacturers in the world, GM, from what I could find, 25,000 people. I mean, I'm laughing because it sounds like a joke, but and normally you'd say 25,000 people just working in R&D. That would be really impressive. But compared to 110,000, and you can see it. You can see the fact that BYD, its sub-branch is Yangwang, which is a luxury supercar branch. They have made the U9 supercar. The U9 Extreme just recently took the record for the fastest car in the world. The U9, I think, has taken about 5 or 6 years to create that supercar, but they've gone from the supercar to the Extreme, which is the one that broke the record. I think that was mooted in late 2023 or mid 2023, and then in 2024 it did that. So just over a year it took him to do that. By contrast, if you think about it, it took Bugatti 6 years to come up with the Veyron, the previous sort of fastest car in the world. So you can see what's happening there, and you can see the pace at which is happening there, and you can see how this is an undeniable threat to the legacy car companies, the global car industry as we knew it. And I will say knew it already in past tense, because it's already changed to that level. Hi guys, if you're enjoying this video, finding it useful, then don't forget to hit that like button and share and comment if you can as well, and support independent journalism channels like mine. You can do that at patreon.com, at coffee.com, or right here on YouTube you can take out a voluntary subscription. Or you know what? You can buy my books. I've got 3 out at the moment. One is a fantastic thriller. It's a novel. It's called The Ulysses Files. Go check it out, about the war on cars. And I've got a collection of short stories. That's called Quantum Races, and that's out at the moment. And then this year I put out How to Be an Automotive Content Creator. It's about how to do what I do, and that's all of these are now available on Amazon. If you buy any of those books, I will be very, very grateful. If you buy all 3, I'll put you into a draw to win a unique and exclusive set keyring and brown car guy badge. There are only 17 of these left. There were only 20, 3 have gone out. There's just 17 left now, so hurry up with that. Anyway, now back to the video. While Japanese and US brands appear to have lost some European market share to Chinese rivals, the sales growth for Chinese cars elsewhere also came at the expense of the continent's car makers, continent by European car makers. So we're talking about other markets around the world. Now, we've already seen Africa, Asia, lots of Chinese brands emerging. My trip to the UAE last December, after a period of 6 years, I was staggered to see the number of Chinese cars that are now on the streets of Dubai. You know, brands that I just didn't even know existed. I had never heard of them. I couldn't recognize them, and I was like, what is that? What is that? What's that van? What's that SUV? You know, and they're doing really well. Jetour apparently is doing really well in the off-roading scene over there. In Pakistan as well. There's a lot of these Chinese brands now coming into that market. I've heard from friends and from my Instagram reels or Instagram feeds and stuff like that. So you can see that they are starting to dominate lots of markets where traditionally, if you like, it was the same sort of playbook that the Japanese used and then the Koreans used, but the Chinese are going in harder, faster, greater. And they're doing it with greater tech. Again, going back to the Yangwangs, for example, that Yangwang U9 has a couple of party tricks. You know, it can drive along on 3 wheels. It's a supercar, can drive along on 3 wheels. You take the SUV Yangwang, whatever that's called, I can't remember, but it will do things like the tank turn. Okay, so the Mercedes G-Class EV can do the tank turn, fine. But what else can this Yangwang SUV do? It can float in water. So with increasing incidences of flooding and storms and tornadoes and typhoons and things around the world, they have created an SUV which, if you needed to, they don't say to go and do it for fun, but the facility is there. It will float on water, it will power itself along that water, and you can even steer it within that water. I mean, this is what the R&D departments are coming up with. And BYD, which is essentially the world's largest and fastest growing EV maker, and they are dominating EV sales around the world, and electrified sales as well, I should say, i.e. hybrids as well. They're constructing a fleet of 8 ships. That's the car company itself is constructing a fleet of 8 ships. They're not using a shipping company, they're not buying, well, they probably are as well, but they're constructing 8 ships. And in addition to that, even if they don't have to send cars from China to abroad, they have factories. They got a factory in Brazil, in Hungary, Indonesia, Thailand, Turkey, and Uzbekistan. So honestly, the whole idea when people poo-pooed what I said earlier about legacy car companies, being on the chopping block, or that is the reality. This is where we are going, and I don't really see a way out, because the amount of investment and manpower that these Chinese companies are throwing at their automobile industry, including the infrastructure, I don't think that the legacy companies can compete with that. They can close the borders. So this is what America has done, for example. But even there, if you remember, just I think a couple of weeks ago, Trump went to China and he made some sort of a deal with China. So whereas at the moment we saw, like, what was it, some ridiculous maybe 200% tariffs or whatever, because it was 100 and then there was another 100 and I lost track of it. But there was a huge tariff on Chinese products, essentially making them impossible to bring into America, but they may have done a deal there. Now, the American car industry was kind of protected, insulated by the fact that those tariffs were keeping the Chinese out and they could go and do their own thing, which feels like they've reverted back to form, i.e. combustion engine. And even companies like GM, which were actually very early proponents of electrification and came out with the Chevy Bolt and stuff like that, even they have retrenched back into internal combustion engine. And Dodge, for example, they've got the electric Charger. It's not selling. They had a 6-cylinder. They're already talking about putting a V8 in. In fact, they just released a Dodge Charger brand new with a Hemi V8 in it, although that's a dragster edition only. But I think it's a small step from there to going, yeah, let's just make road cars with Hemi V8s in them again. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm going to cheer for that. I'll be like, yay, Hemi's back, great, love it. Give me more V8s. I'm going to cheer for that. But at the same time, you got to look at the industry, you got to look at the trend, you got to look at what's happening globally, and you got to say, well, this is what it is. The Chinese we will pretty much be seeing, wall-to-wall Chinese cars on our roads very soon, definitely within the next 5 years. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm going to keep on top of this. Stay tuned. Keep it locked to Brown Car Guy, and make sure you only hit the notification button. People say to me, I met people on the weekend at the Classic Car Show, and people that know my channel, they follow me, and they're like, yeah, you've not been doing any content. I keep telling people, subscribing is not enough. You must engage, interact with the content. Hit the very least, hit that like button. Ideally, comment, share, all of this sort of stuff. But at the very least do that, because if you don't do that, YouTube will decide that you're just a passive viewer and you're not really that interested, and it will just show you other content. And then you think, well, I'm not really doing anything. Whereas the people that are following my content regularly will know that I put out content very, very regularly. Anyway, catch you all in the next one. Speak to you soon.